Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Wiese.
Welcome to this live experience of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4-Wheel Parts. Trying a little bit different thing today. I got different camera setup, different microphone setup. I'm sitting in a different spot, and I'm going to try a little bit different show here. This show is actually going to talk a little bit about me, about some of the connections that I've made, the networking, all the cool doors that have opened up just based on doing this whole podcast deal. So I'm going to talk about that. And it's kind of crazy. Normally, I don't know if everybody knows this, but I put quite a bit of effort into like preparing for shows. I do outlines for everything, and this one I'm kind of winging it. Like I sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna roll with this one today. So yeah, if you're joining the show, if this is your first time with the live show, go ahead and leave a comment. Leave a little emoji, ask a question. This is going to be about me. Lots of personal things here. So if you have those questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Share it, invite your friends, whatever it may be. If you're listening to the audio version of this later, head over to iTunes, leave a rating and review. That would be phenomenal. I was actually really excited today too. We hit the What's Hot category for the second time ever for iTunes ratings. So we were sitting there, it was so cool, right next to the Dirty Dooner show, which, Jake's been on this show before, Jake Coleman. He's just an awesome guy. So he was right next to me there, and then Jim Beaver was next to us. I was like, man, that's so cool. So I had to share that out. But Sam, you just joined too. Thanks for the idea for the show. But yeah, before I get into the topic here about connections and networking and all the things that have kind of opened up for me, I want to talk about 4-Wheel Parts, which is another connection, and Bold Racing. So 4-Wheel Parts has some really good deals going on right now. So just head over to 4wheelparts.com, check it out. They got lots of good stuff with Pro Comp, with BF Goodrich, suspension systems that they have deals on, Smittyville products, lots of good stuff going on there. So check them out. But they're just cool too. Like, go follow their Instagram page. They just got awesome stuff on there all the time. They just did a thing with, the Diesel brothers, and they jumped this monster truck, and it was really cool. Just tons of good connections that they're making too. And then Bold Racing. So Bold Racing is another connection. I'm going to talk more about them in a little bit, but they've been part of the live show and the podcast for a long time now, and they've opened up a lot of doors for me and given me some experiences that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. But they also happen to be experts with axles, UTV axles, so you can get a hold of them and get you a set of GSP XTV axles. Or asking for other stuff. I mean, they used to do suspension. Actually, they still do some tweaks here and there, but they're into all sorts of good stuff, so reach out to them. But let's just kind of break it down here. I'm going to go way back to the beginning when I didn't even have this show yet, but I was still doing some things in motorsports. So I started this little thing called Impact Fuel, and I literally had zero understanding of the motorsports business. I mean, I'd been riding snowmobiles my whole life and four-wheelers my whole life. So I knew how the stuff worked to an extent, but I had no idea of the business side of things. And what I ended up doing was I did this Impact Fuel project for a little while. I won't get into details of that, but I did this Impact Fuel project, and people started asking me like, hey, can you sponsor me, blah, 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 sponsor me? And it made me start thinking, and I actually made 2 connections like right off the bat. Actually, 3 connections. This is going to get crazy. I probably should have planned this show out better because this is just going to keep, spider webbing out. But I made 3 connections. But one that was really impactful right from the start was Mason Rutledge. Mason Rutledge reached out to me, and he's a backcountry rider, and he's like, hey, man, why don't we work together and promote one another? It'd be kind of like a sponsored rider deal. And I was like, what's a sponsored rider? I don't know what that is. And either way, Mason introduced me to even the concept of a sponsored rider. And we had this kind of deal. I promoted him, he promoted me, and we brought another member of the team on too. And but Mason gave me that idea, and I started thinking like, if he needed help with some of the stuff, there's got to be other people that need help. So he actually helped me kind of map out the idea for the show, which I didn't even know was going to be a show at the time. But so that was pretty interesting. So I met him via Instagram, I think, and around the same time, Jimmy Moore started partaking in my impact fuel things. And Jimmy Moore is, with Bold Racing, as I mentioned earlier. And, so Jimmy started donating miles through impact fuel. I'm not going to get into what that means, but it was pretty cool. But he started donating miles, and then he's like, hey, I want to sponsor impact fuel. I want to be a part of it. So either way, he came on board as a sponsor early on with impact fuel. I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty crazy. So these people have kind of gotten me a few more connections. And then there was a bunch of other people that just, they were following along or whatever, maybe messaging me, but I don't know, those two just stuck out. So like, let's just look at Mason Rutledge here and Jimmy Moore. At some point, their interactions with me forced me to say, you know what, it is time to take this whole sponsorship thing to another category. So I started the show. This would have been December of 2016, roughly. If you're listening to the audio version of this, I'm recording it on May 29th, 2019. I'm doing it live. And when I started doing the show, I was like, what am I going to do? I literally didn't know anything. And definitely not about sponsorship. Definitely not about the racing side of things. Like, I was a casual watcher of racing. Like, that's it. So either way, I made another connection when I was starting to investigate doing the show, and that was Tristan Lowe. So Tristan Lowe, at the time, he was a 16-year-old ATV racer, and him and I were just kind of chatting about what could we potentially do. I don't even know how I made that connection with Tristan, but like, we made the show, we recorded our first episode together, and it was just a pilot for me. I wasn't even sure if I was going to release it or not, and we did some test runs with it. Well, he basically posted it on his Twitter, the test run, and I don't know, people started downloading it. They started listening. And I was like, oh, this is a good deal, man. And then I was like, why am I going to get a bunch of guests? I want to do one every week. So either way, so Tristan, who I made a connection, I think it started with Impact Fuel. So similar to how I did with Mason and Jimmy Moore. I made that connection. We started doing the show, and then after that, I was like, I gotta get more people. So I started the Facebook group, and I started inviting people. And there's this one dude. I was like, who's this dude, Jeff Vanistal? Like, what's this guy? I saw him. I was like, he works for Can-Am. Like, that'd be cool to have him on the show. And boom, I reached out to him. He was cool with coming on the show. Social media manager at actually, I'm not sure if that's his title anymore. Community relations manager. I don't know. Cool title at Can-Am, but he came on the show. He's got this business, topthepodium.com. I was like, this is phenomenal. So he comes on board, episode 2. So this is like, I didn't even know I was going to do a show. Then I ended up just releasing it, and I make this connection with Jeff Vanistal, and that was just huge for me because he came on the show, did really good, and that was episode 2. So 4 episodes later, he's like, hey, why don't I sponsor your show? Like, topthepodium.com has a perfect connection, with Sponsored Rider Club podcast. And literally, he's been with us ever since. So this, when I released it, I think it's going to be episode 160. He's been with us since episode 6. He was first on 4. Like, that's just crazy how that happened. But it was just random luck, honestly, that I stumbled across this guy. He came on the show. We had a connection. We started networking. It was really good. And honestly, people don't know this. I don't know if I shared this before, but I think what made my connection with Jeff really strong early on is I actually botched the whole interview. So something went wrong with my setup. I don't remember what it was, and I lost the whole interview. So I had to go back to Jeff and say, hey man, that was such a good show, but can we do it again? Because I completely lost everything. So either way, we got to actually record 2 shows. Relatively the same thing, but we got to do 2 shows, and I don't know, I would have probably walked away from me like, this dude completely botched, this episode. But hey, it worked out. He wanted to stay on. He became a sponsor, and that opened up a ton of doors for me. That connection alone just added some, I don't know what the right word is, like validity to the program. So that was pretty cool that he helped me establish the show a little bit stronger. So that's a good connection, right? Later on, so we're talking 2 episodes later, was when I got what I would say is my big break from a connection standpoint, and that was with Jim Beaver. I feel like I've already had a couple of big breaks here, but I met Jim Beaver, and it was just via Instagram. I don't know how it happened. Like, he found my show and put a little comment somewhere or liked the picture, and I was like, oh, this guy is doing like the things that I want to do. So I got a hold of him just via direct message on Instagram, and I asked him if he wanted to come on the show. He's like, yeah, let's do it. And prior to that point, I had amazing guests, right? Great people getting started, but Jim had a really big audience, and we had that connection, and immediately that show did really, really well, at least compared to what I had already done. So his show did well, and then he started introducing me to other people. He introduced me to Amy Hood. Amy Hood was episode 7, and she had a very substantial following. And her episode just blew up my show in a good way, and I was really excited about that. But like, I made that connection with Jim, and then he connected me with Amy. She connected me with a whole bunch of other people after that, because just the show got a lot of exposure. So yeah, just really cool how those things happen. And I just want to kind of play some of those things out. I mean, we're talking, this is the first 4 weeks of me doing this show. 3 weeks prior to that, I didn't even know I was going to do the show. Like, I thought I was just playing around. But yeah, that was a pretty important day for me to get that connection with Jim. And then follow that up with Amy. Now, the next thing is with Jim, not everybody knows this, is that he kind of does a pseudo mentorship with me. We meet every now and then. He's been on the show several times. He leaves me feedback, right? He lets me know, hey, why don't you try doing this differently? Or, the whole structure that I have with the way I promote my show, honestly, is based off of recommendations from Jim. So that's just an interesting connection point I wanted to share, because it's just really important. Oh, so let's keep going. I'm actually going to fast forward a little bit here. I want to get to the point where I had Sean Endel on. I guess that's not really much of a fast forward. That was episode 9. But Sean Endel came on, and from the backcountry world, he opened up the market quite a bit for me. And I had always wanted to target backcountry riders, but he was, his show did really well on episode 9, and which is exciting, which opened me up to Brock Hoyer on episode 10. So just really good kickoff start to these things. Later on, though, this continues. The trend continues. I meet someone in a new industry, and they connect me to somebody else. It just in a positive way snowballed. Then I started getting, invites, right? People were asking me to come to events or do races with them or whatever it may be. So going back to Jimmy Moore, like, he said, hey, why don't you come out to Vegas to Reno? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. I'm going to go to a guy I met online's house, and I'm going to, stay with his family, and I'm going to then ride with him across Nevada in the desert. Like, who does that, right? But I did it. And I remember the first time he called me up and told me about it, I was still, hesitant, right? I was like, this is a new thing. It's kind of scary. Like, I've never done desert racing. And I was like, Jimmy, man, I know you've been with me for a while, but I still don't know you. And, but I did it, and it was great. And from that point, oh man, this is blowing my mind, all these connections. So go out to Vegas to Reno. Jimmy Moore's there. I'm helping them out. Have no idea what I'm doing, right? And I'm meeting new people, and then I stumble across this group selling this stuff called solder weld. Like, ooh, what's this? And I say, hey, would you mind just chatting with me? Let's talk a little bit about motorsport sponsorship. And I was able to talk to them at their booth, right? And at the time, that was Zeke from Solderweld. I talked to him. I interviewed him for a couple minutes, and shoot, a week, 2 weeks later, Lance Robinson, the owner, reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'd like to sponsor your show. And I'm like, man, what? How does this happen, right? And at Vegas Arena, I started meeting all these other people, and I started seeing people that I had on the show, and it just made it more real. And I could walk up to somebody and say like, hey, I know you, right? And I could walk up to somebody and say, would you do an interview with me? It was really cool, really cool. But Jim Beaver, going back to episode 4, right? So Jim Beaver is helping me get things set up for my show and new connections and stuff. And then Jimmy Moore is getting me out to Vegas to Reno. Well, then Jim Beaver's like, why don't you interview people that I have coming here, which is Travis Pastrana and Jolene Van View. And I was like, okay, let's do it, man. So, he connected me with two, just of some of the top people in our industry. Like Travis Pastrana, arguably, he's number 1, too. Like Ken Block and him are probably at the top. And he's been on the show. Like, that was really cool. And I got to meet him and shake his hand, and really cool stuff. And that would not have been possible if all these other connections up until that point hadn't happened. So I don't know. That's just pretty impactful thinking about those things. And Solderwell comes on. Like, this is wild that these connections happen. Like, I didn't plan that. I couldn't have planned that, I don't think. I didn't honestly know about Solderweld until Vegas Reno. I thought it was super cool. That's what I walked up their booth. I was like, how does this even work? And then that's how we got into the relationship we're in now. They've been with me ever since then. That was August of 2017. So almost 2 years. So pretty crazy. Let's go to episode 43, right? I had some dude named Travis Pointer. I was like, is this guy just spelling his name wrong? Like, looks like it should be Travis, but he's got an E in there. What's up with that? He comes on the show, and we hit it off, and his show did phenomenal. Like, at the time, that was the top show that I had produced, even bigger than Amy Hood's and some of the other ones that I had done. And it was a good episode, and I really connected with him. And later on, he's like, hey man, you got a Polaris Razor, right? Like, yeah. He's like, let's outfit it with some stuff, man. You're driving around with no bumpers on? Like, who does that? So I started running Crash Addict Industry bumpers, and after that, he stayed on with the show, and he's been part of the show ever since, right? Crash Addict Industries, a huge part of the show. He was Travis, based off that connection, he was running my logo on his race cars. That's awesome, right? I could have never gotten that experience any other way. At least I don't think so. So the thing with Travis alone is phenomenal. Now I'll go to a little bit softer connection. I go on LinkedIn, and I just see some people. I'm like, oh, who's this Kevin Castner guy? Like, Amsoil? I like Amsoil. Let's see what he's got going on. And I connect with him on LinkedIn. And I didn't know it. We weren't really doing anything with it, but he was watching the show and paying attention. And so that weird little click link on LinkedIn led to ultimately Kevin reaching out to me and his partner Nick Lansing saying, why don't we become part of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, right? And that was over a year ago. Just these weird little connections that happen. I just thought of another one. Connections. That's the name of the show, man. Connections. So going way back to when I was talking about Mason Rutledge and how him and I started kind of collaborating early on with Impact Fuel. He introduced me to Curtis Fernie. Curtis is another backcountry rider, and at the time, he owned a realty company, 4U Ranch Realty, and he started sponsoring Impact Fuel with his realty company. And we did that for a little while. It was great. And the thing I want to hit on though here is he's kind of pulled a Jimmy Moore and said, hey, why don't you come out and go snowmobiling with me out west? I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, it's another stranger. Like, I'm going to go in a hotel with him and ride his snowmobile. Sure, why wouldn't I? I did that. Like, that was so much fun, and moving on from there, like, I mean, like Rohan Merchant. I don't know if you're still watching right now. I know that in Australia the time difference is a little strange, but so I met Rohan through the show, and like we chat every now and then, and he lives in Australia. I was like, that's super cool. The show has some reach in Australia. Like, that's phenomenal. But him and I have talked about things like, hey, maybe I need to go out to Australia sometime, right? He's invited me out there, and I haven't been able to make that work, but yeah, mate, you can hear me. Yeah, I'm talking about you now too. Like, we're thinking about future me getting out to Australia and hanging out with you, or maybe hopping in a race car at some point. But like, even just the fact that we've made this connection, and I can talk about Rohan over a live show like this is pretty cool, and I always see his name popping up here. I always see Stephen Rice popping up here. What other, gosh, these connections are crazy. Let's go to Scott Sparrow for a minute. Scott Sparrow has been on the show. He was episode 70 or 71. He's the one that really taught me how to do live videos. Now, I mess him up every now and then, so maybe I can blame that on him. I don't know. But no, he taught me how to do this. He gave me a lot of the courage to do these live shows. I mean, I've literally been sitting here now for how many minutes? Where's my timer at? 21 minutes, just running my mouth, like winging it. And Scott helped give me some of the confidence to do that. And I met him. Oh gosh, how did that work? Through the show originally, but then I ended up meeting him at Heydays, right? I met him at Heydays, and then I met John Ferrian at Heydays, and John came on the show, and he crushed it. He created my best live show ever from a exposure standpoint. So I don't know. I'm like, I think it's so interesting, and I've definitely been able to do this on the show where I break down people's connections, and how they like have led to new things and bigger things, and it's just so intriguing to me. I feel like I could do this all day. I'm going to keep doing this all day because, hey, we still got some time left here. Thinking of another one here is Joey D. Joey D. Giovanni. He came on episode 24 of the show, which is early on. I mean, not that I'm like known now, but like I was really new still. And Joey D came on, he was talking about UTV Underground and all this other good stuff, and his show just crushed it. But like, I brought him on later, right, with Sarah Price. Oh, Sarah Price was on episode 12 too. But like, I got those two on the same show at the same time, and which is phenomenal. And guess what? Shortly after that, Joey D is a part of 4 Wheel Parts, and he says, look, I like what you're doing with the show. I want to be a part of it. So, now we've got, I showed it on my shirt here earlier, but 4 Wheel Parts is the title sponsor for the show now. And that, like, if I wouldn't have reached out to Joey D on episode 24 and made that connection, if he wouldn't have seen other people on the show that had some credibility, right, he may not have come on the show then either. And that was huge. And then, so like, I would have never pictured that turning out the way it did. The reason why I'm talking about this is I want you to reflect on some things that have happened in your programs, right? Like, what are some of the cool things that you have, or cool connections that you have made, and what's that led to? Like, what's been that chain of effects? Because it's pretty incredible when you start breaking it all down and think of, had I just done this one thing differently, who knows what would have. I probably wouldn't have had the Martelli brothers on if I didn't have Joey D. Now I've had, both Josh and Matt on. I've had Josh on the live show. And then I got to meet him, I met Matt out of Vegas to Reno, which is really cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy stuff. So I don't know. For me, as I'm kind of an extrovert as well, these things are some of the most important things. This is why I do the show. All the other stuff is great. I love producing the content. I love showing a little bit of creativity. But really, the connecting with people, that's what it's all about. Absolutely love it. Oh, shoot. I thought of another one. Kevin Spangler. So Kevin actually normally joins these things. I don't know if he's hopped on this one at all, but Kevin Spangler has been a part of the show for a long time, and he's been paying attention and commenting and giving me advice. He's been good behind the scenes. If something goes wrong with my Google Play, which is probably the most finicky platform, he sends me a message right away. He's like, "Hey man, Google Play is not posting right. You need to fix this." I'm like, "Man, if you didn't do that, like I wouldn't notice." But he messaged me the other day. He's going to drop a shipment off somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, you around?" Yeah, I'm around. What's up, man? He said, "I'm coming by your area." I was like, "All right, let's go grab some food, man." So it was cool. We got to stop and eat lunch. Like he was just driving through, and that was pretty neat. And that's pretty important to me. That stuff is pretty doggone exciting. Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. I was gonna stop there for a minute, but hey, we still got some time left. I normally like to keep these around 30 minutes, so let's see if I can talk for a little bit longer about a few more connections. So one, I buy this Jeep, right? This is just recently. I bought a Jeep, and I'm like, man, now I'm cool because I got a Jeep. But no, there's some strategy to it as well. I wanted to start breaking this show out into different segments, including the Jeep segment and off-road segment a little bit deeper. And I got Brad Kowitz to agree to come on from Trail Recon. I was like, man, this guy, first off, Brad is like one of my favorite people in the world. But I bring Brad on, and then all of a sudden, like, he introduced me to other people. So then I got Rob Spencer comes on from Venture to Wild, which is great. Marco Hernandez comes on of Overland X, and Tiffany Stone comes back on. It's just like, gosh, what a good connection. So Stephen Rice which Stephen's been, man, you've been there since the beginning too. You've been there since Impact Fuel days, man. But yeah, he just said it's a lot of hard work and commitment on top of all the connections that make the magic happen. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can get a connection and then just like drop it, right? You can just let it go. It's easy. Super easy to let connections go. Very hard to maintain them. But you got to be selective about how you're going to use your time. You got to prioritize that time. And I think the connections is a big part of it. Yeah, what else? Gosh. Kirk at HMK, I had him come on the show, and like I needed new gear anyways for my riding. Like I had this old, I don't know, 20-year-old Arctic Cat gear, which was great at the time, but I mean, it didn't breathe. It was always too hot, or I don't know. It never was right. And Kirk's like, yeah, man, I'm gonna hook you up. Like, we're gonna run some HMK. And I was like, man, what a good guy. I didn't ask for this, right? And he's like, hey, when you're at Heydays, why don't you come podcast out of my booth, man? I was like, yeah, this is good stuff. And that would have never happened without Tucker Mertz. So Tucker Mertz connected, Kirk and myself. Like, he wanted to come on the show. And I was like, Tucker, you want to come on the show? Like, let's make this a cool show. How do you want to do it? He said, I can bring someone on. I'll bring Kirk from HMK. I was like, all right, let's do it. And he made it happen. And then, I don't even know how did I get to meet Tucker? I don't know how that happened, but like, these are just crazy connections. But and it looks like we just got another comment here. Calculated Risk Racing Team, what's up? You were a great encouragement to us when we met you at VTR 2018. Thanks, and we see it as making you friends. That's it. It is. It's all about friends, That's why I love this industry. I mean, I just don't think every other industry is like this. I don't know. I just don't feel like you can just reach out there and sit in someone's booth and podcast out of it, or like walk up to someone at a race and I don't know. There's just no other platform that I think really feels as good as this does from a connection standpoint. But yeah, wow, I feel like I'm leaving out a bunch of stuff here, but I think you got the point. The point is that this show has for me, opened up a lot of new experiences, new connections, and I think things like that can happen for anyone listening, can happen for anyone in the world, right? You gotta get out of your comfort zone a little bit. I had to, right? I had to step out of comfort zone a few times. Well, actually, like a lot, like constantly. But you step out of your comfort zone, you meet some people, you ask some questions, get some connections, and things just start blossoming from there. One thing I'll leave you with is like maybe a quick little tangible piece of advice, which has worked wonders. I think that Tiffany Stone may have introduced this to me on episode 57. If you make a connection with somebody and you're talking, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, let's say you're looking for a new shock sponsor, right? So, and you talk to somebody like, oh yeah, I've been with Fox Shocks for 10 years and they're great people, blah blah blah, and they're like, you should connect with them, all right? So let's say you get that opportunity, ask this question, say, oh yeah, I would love to get connected. Ask this, can you send them an email? Just to start. It could be numerous other ways, but send them an email that connects both of them. So it says, hey, Fox Shocks, meet Josh Wiese. Josh Wiese, meet Fox Shocks. I just want to introduce you to. I think there could be a good collaborative effort that happens here. That's it. I'll leave it from here. Peace. You can be someone who facilitates that. You might be able to ask a friend to do that, but like that is tangible and it works. Oh, it works so good. Obviously if you can make a face-to-face connection, right, like at a live event, oh, hey, right next to me, this is, Bob, and Bob, this is Fox Shocks. Like, you guys would be great working together, right? That's phenomenal. But just that little email thing, that little trick is a game changer. It's done a lot for me, and I try to do that with people as well. Like, if I see that there could be a potential connection, let's just boom, make it happen. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But one more connection, and I love it. All right, well, hey, I appreciate everybody sticking in here with this show. Again, as a reminder, if you're listening to the audio version or if you're listening live, head over to iTunes, leave a rating and review. It does a lot for the show. Things like that are what get us onto the What's Hot list. And that gets us more downloads, which means we can reach more people, which means we can continue to make this show, right? If nobody listens, I don't know. I mean, can we still make the show? I mean, I could try, but I need the support, and that's one way to give the support. But yeah, otherwise, if you're listening to this show later, go ahead and leave a question in the comments section. I can come back through and check that later time. Share it out to your friends, whatever it may be. All of it is good. And why don't you go give Bold Racing and 4 Wheel Parts a follow. They have made this live show possible. And that's it. I'm going to leave you with this. Have fun and ride safe.